Okay, so thank you very much for attending our SEALS talk this year. We're going to be talking about an ongoing issue in the analysis of Munda languages in general, and specifically in the analysis of Santali. What we're going to be talking about is the preliminary work that we've been doing to determine the prosodic system, the prominent system in Santali, starting first with the study of disyllables. So the outline of the talk is going to be first an attempt to begin a systematic documentation of the Santali variety of Assam, and specifically to examine phonetic prominence in disyllables with acoustic analysis, and to reevaluate, based on this, the prosodic typology of Kherwarian Munda languages. So first we'll start with an overview of the topic at hand within Munda and in Santali specifically, and then some methods used in the present study, and then the findings of the study, and a little bit of discussion at the end. So first, background on Munda languages as a whole. Here we find a wide array of different perspectives that have been put forth in the literature on individual languages. So we'll first start at the very earliest system, which was the Proto-Munda system proposed by Donegan and Stamp, that claimed that Munda was a trochaic language. Proto-Munda was a trochaic language, so initial syllable prominence in a disyllable structure. Modern individual Munda languages have quite a wide range of different analyses. So in Ramo, Bhattacharya analyzed this as a second position stress system for that language, where even loan words that had initial stress or initial prominence from Desya are given second syllable prominence, like korda, whip. Korawa has a totally different type of system here, according to the analysis of Barker. In 1 and 2 syllable nouns, the stress is on the last syllable of the stem. So grammatical markers being extrametrical in this analysis. In Gata, we find to be verified anecdotally a system that also appears to be second syllable stress, or second syllable prominence, excuse me. And so this would be indicated in, among other words, the word for the language, Gata, which has at best a very weak reduced vowel in the first syllable and a very prominent second syllable vowel. Turning now to slightly more complicated systems. Korea is a language that's been analyzed by Rehberg in an MA thesis from 2003 as having a first syllable prominence, but the first syllable is indicated by lower pitch. But we will point out that the language is called Korea, and schwa is not a phoneme in the language. It seems extremely unlikely that they would have a first syllable prominent system and have reduced vowels that are showing that or carrying that prominence. Intensity in Rehberg's analysis is said to be on any syllable. This is yet to be instrumentally verified by us. In the typological literature, like Shearing and Vanderhulst, they took her analysis and said that low pitch is the main phonetic correlate of accent. But as I alluded to earlier, vowel space contrasts and between first and second syllables, data on duration, et cetera, have yet to be verified. So we'll pause on our interpretation of Rehberg's account, but just it's out there. And now turning to a language related to Santali, Ho, analyzed by Puchalowski in her PhD 2013 as having a quantity sensitive trochaic stress pattern. So if the second syllable is heavy, it takes stress. Now, in some cases, this requires an analysis where the second syllable gets vowel length, which is non-etymological, as in chabakana, to keep this analysis intact. So again, her analysis needs to be instrumentally verified. An earlier account of Ho by Notrot in 1882 presented a partially morpholexically conditioned system. So this included nouns having initial stress, but verbs that are of the exactly identical sequence would take stress in various places depending on the morphological structure of the word. Now this again should be kept in mind. that is if it is an open syllable, and if it was a closed syllable, there were even more complications. So this shows the difference between kaji and so there are different patterns attested in different morphological contexts and with different shapes of stems. Again, this all needs to be verified instrumentally before we can conclude what Ho is really like. Now, Mundari is all over the place. There have been almost as many analyses of Mundari as there have been people who've analyzed Mundari. So it's even been described as both a stress language and as a pitch accent language. So within the stress camp, we have Langdon, Cook, and Sinha. Some claim it's a quantity sensitive trochaic system. This would be Cook. And then also Shearing and Vanderhulst picked that up. Sinha, on the other hand, was all over the place, but he said it was not a trochaic system, and in fact called it a quantity sensitive iambic system. Osada analyzed the language rather as a pitch accent language, saying that stress was generally assigned on the second or third syllable and occurs in the third syllable only in suffixes. So again, this would be partly morpholexically conditioned, but never on the first syllable, regardless of syllable weight. So he rejects a quantity sensitive trochaic system outright. Hoffman didn't offer much of use in this particular case, saying that the accentuated syllable has hardly more stress than the non-accentuated syllable, whatever that means. So turning now to the two languages that we'll be looking at in this talk. First, Sora. Sora has been analyzed in various ways by different scholars. So first, again, starting with Donegan and Stamp, quantity sensitive trochaic stress systems, so similar to what we saw in Puchalowski's analysis of Ho. Ramamurti, on the other hand, very explicitly said that certain things bear stress and certain things do not in the morphological structure of Sora. So this is something that we are presently undergoing tests to verify. However, the initial stress system, the quantity sensitive trochaic system, was proven to be inaccurate by Luke in his PhD of 2017. And as I mentioned, the morphologically conditioned stress system is going to be tested by us in the coming months. Santali also has been all over the place in the analyses. Botting, in his original work, talked about a morphologically conditioned system, but also alluded to the fact that it could be quantity sensitive. Based on his analysis, Neukomm basically came up with a system very similar to that of Puchalowski's analysis of Ho. That is, if the first syllable is light and the second heavy, stress falls on the second syllable, otherwise on the first syllable. So in other words, the quantity sensitive trochaic system. Whereas Ghosh says it's fixed second position stress. So again, Santali is all over the place, and that's part of the impetus for this particular study. Is we're trying to use acoustic data to come up with an analysis in at least disyllables in Assam variety of Santali. And Luke's going to share our data on this in the next few slides.
Yeah, so in order to examine the prominence in Santali, and here we would like to explicitly mention that by prominence, we are primarily looking at the phonetic prominence and disyllabic forms. So in order to examine the phonetic prominence in Santali, we compiled a set of 51 disyllabic words that are primarily non-derived nouns, words such as body parts, names of animals, and other natural objects. And in the data set, the words have an optional coda consonants in both syllables, first and second, but a mandatory onset consonant in the second syllable only. Also, some words in the data set have an optional onset cluster in the second syllable only. And here are some of the examples of the Santali disyllables that we have used in the present study. So taking this data set, we have recorded Santali speakers, and for that purpose, we have recorded the entire data set in 3 different contexts of utterances. In the first context, the data set is elicited in isolation only. And in the second iteration, The data set is produced in controlled phrases that can be translated as I said blank, where the blank position is replaced by the targeted Santali words. And thirdly, the phrase that we have used can be translated as I said blank loudly and not softly, in which case we have elicited the words in an unaccented intonational phrase. So taking this data set in these three different contexts of utterances, we have recorded 6 native Santali speakers, 3 of whom are male and 3 of whom are female, and they all have an average age of 31 years and 11 years of standard deviation. And all the speakers are multilingual speakers, as they can speak Sadri, Assamese, and Hindi as their second and third languages. And the speakers live in 2 villages in the Sonitpur district of Assam, namely Erasuti and Borbil. And this we have observed to be the major concentration of Santali speakers in the Sonitpur district of Assam only. And approximately in both the villages, there are 950 residents, and the residents have claimed that they are 4th generation inhabitants in that area. So taking the data from these 6 speakers, we have done our acoustic analysis of Santali disyllables, for which purpose we have annotated the speech data in Prat, which was done manually, whereby we annotated words, syllables, and phoneme boundaries using different spectral cues in Prat. And subsequently, we measured the 3 acoustic cues of prominence that are known from the works of Fry 1955 and 1958, and this have been established as the 3 primary acoustic cues of prominence, namely vowel duration, vowel intensity, and fundamental frequency, whereby for vowel duration, we have measured the absolute length of vowel nuclei in the first and second syllable. And for vowel intensity, we have measured the mean amplitude of the vowel nuclei. And for fundamental frequency as well, we have measured only the mean F0 of the vowel nuclei in first and second syllable. We have also analyzed the numerical data in R for comparing the acoustic cues in first and second syllable, and also for observing the density distribution of the data. And in order to look at the significance of our result, we have also run a one-way ANOVA test in order to see whether the results that we observe in our data are statistically significant or not. So coming straight to the results now, when we first looked into the vowel duration, we observed that in Santali disyllables, the second syllable is normally longer than the first syllable. And this pattern is observed in all the 3 contexts of utterances that we have mentioned earlier, namely isolation, phrasal, and unaccented. And the distribution of the data also implied that vowel duration values are distinct in first and second syllable, which you can see on in the figure on the right hand of the slide. Similarly, when we observe the vowel intensity data, we notice that vowels in the second syllable are normally louder than the vowels in the first syllable. And this pattern is also observed in all the 3 contexts of utterances. And this pattern is also seen to be distinct in the distribution of the entire data that we have recorded. So we can say that vowel intensity is distinct in first and second syllable, whereby the second syllable is normally louder than the first syllable. Similarly, for the last acoustic cue of prominence, that is fundamental frequency or F0, we have noticed that fundamental frequency, mean fundamental frequency is usually higher in the second syllable, but there is an exception that we have noticed, that whereby in words that are produced in isolation, there is no F0 distinction between the first and the second syllable, but this exception is only limited to the words that are produced in isolation, whereas words that are produced in phrases and in unaccented positions, we notice that our fundamental frequency is higher in the second syllable, but lower in the first syllable, indicating a second syllable prominence. But the exception of isolation has been observed here. And when we look into the distribution of the data, we notice that the F0 distribution is not distinct in the first and the second syllable in isolation as well. And this has been also noticed from our statistic analysis, where all the differences that we have mentioned in our data are statistically different. And the only place where we found no statistically significant difference is in the F0 difference between first and second syllable in words that were produced in isolation only. So from these analyses, we can notice that in Santali disyllables, vowels are louder, longer, and pitched higher in the second syllable, indicating a second syllable prominence. And when we compare these results with our previous analysis of Sora that was done in 2017, we noticed that Sora data taken from 5 different geographical locations also showed longer vowel duration in the second syllable and higher vowel intensity in the second syllable, and also higher fundamental frequency in the second syllable only. And these results were also analyzed for statistical significance, and the statistical results have clearly showed that the difference between vowel intensity, vowel duration, and fundamental frequency is distinct in first and second syllable, supporting the claim that Sora also has second syllable prominence in disyllables. So now if we summarize our study, we can say that phonetic prominence in Santali has been observed to be on the second syllable in disyllabic words, while the second syllable prominence is cued by longer vowel duration and higher vowel intensity. Consistently, in all 3 contexts of utterances, the higher fundamental frequency in second syllable is found in only phrasal and unaccented contexts of utterances, but not in the isolation context of utterance. And this has been also found that there is no statistical difference between fundamental frequency in first and second syllable in words produced in isolation. And these are grossly similar to the Sora results that have been reported earlier. So both the languages have clearly shown acoustic evidence of iambic stress pattern, where the prominence in disyllables are always on the second syllable. And in case of Santali, especially, we managed to observe this difference in phrasal context as well as in unaccented context. And there has been an exception in the isolation with regard to the fundamental frequency Q, but this is something we would like to explore in the future. And also in the future, we would like to conduct similar comparative studies between other Munda languages in order to get a better perspective of what the phonetics and phonology of word stress or intonational structure is in the Munda language family. So this is the summary of our study. And I would like to request my co-presenter to conclude the paper.
So yeah, the overall projection of our work here is to continue to systematically study Santali both in Assam and in West Bengal and Jharkhand, as well as Northern Odisha, and as well as systematically sampling other Munda languages, again, across different locations, and compiling all this into a large comparative study of prominence patterns, first starting with underived words and then expanding into larger derived structures to test the morpholexical claims that have been put forth by various languages by previous researchers. And also comparing these with phrases and indeed sentences of similar phonological length in terms of syllables, a number of syllables, et cetera, so that we can get a better picture on what it is that defines word versus phrase versus sentence in terms of prominence patterns and other intonational phenomena, as well as testing various words under explicit focus and out of focus, as we showed in the methodology of this paper. So ultimately, this will lead to a very grand view and a snapshot that's acoustically grounded and phonetically validatable through statistics as well. Quantifiable data will support this, whatever the conclusions are. This is just the first step in this long process that we have begun recently and will be pursuing over the next few years, and hope to share some more of results of this in upcoming SEALS meetings in the future. So thanks for listening, and we'll be happy to field any questions that you might have.